Rebonjour et merci de m'accompagner dans ma deuxième présentation sur les caractéristiques d'une politique de protection des consommateurs modernes. Je vais poursuivre ma présentation en anglais, mais je vais garder quand même mes diapositives en français. As I was saying, thank you and welcome back for this second presentation on modern characteristics characteristics of a modern consumer protection policy. In this presentation, what I would like to convey to you is what does a modern consumer protection policy look like? What are the most international best practices on this? And then later, we will be able to move into much more specific issues regarding the Portuguese and EU experience by my colleague Ana Filipa Calvo from the Director General for Consumers of Portugal. In this very broad definition of what a modern consumer protection policy is, my goal is for you to feel enticed to participate and to contribute to the design of a consumer protection policy nationwide, or to the revision of the existing ones that you may have if that is necessary. In any case, I encourage you to share your experience and to enlighten us with what you have contributed to or what you think you can contribute. So the content of my presentation is a brief introduction. Then how can we raise to the contemporary challenges of consumer protection? How can we succeed in implementing consumer protection policies? What are the conditions? And some questions for discussion. I mentioned in my previous presentation that the very basis of consumer protection is the inherent imbalance between consumers and businesses in the marketplace. Again, businesses and consumers do not have the same bargaining or the same knowledge in the marketplace when they are confronted one another, when they are in a business to consumer relation. That is, business know their art, they are better equipped to comply with regulations, and they know their obligations, whereas consumers are in a much more vulnerable situation. Consumers can hardly be expected to know what are all the legal provisions that regulate markets. They can hardly know sometimes even how to enforce their rights or even know if they have rights. That is why governments and parliaments and judges come to re-equilibrate this situation, to put back the rightful place where consumers and businesses can treat each other to one-on-one, and where consumers are empowered in a marketplace. In a sense, consumer protection addresses a market failure, and that is that without regulations, there will be abusive use of the market and of powers by businesses against consumers. Let us see what is the framework of this consumer protection nowadays. Well, perhaps the first and foremost drive of consumer protection are public institutions, are powers of the state. That not only includes governments, but also parliaments and judges. And they all have a very important role in setting what a consumer protection law and policy is in any given country or region. From these public institutions emanate laws and policies that regulate markets, both nationally and regionally. And it is in this framework of laws and regulations that other market operators, such as consumer associations and businesses, operate and develop their activities for their institutional purposes. How can we raise to the challenges? Well, first of all, we need to strive to increase the knowledge and capacities of consumers. This is the basis of consumer empowerment. This is also the basis of most of consumer protection authorities at the national level and one of the main functions of consumer associations. At the same time, while striving to increase consumer knowledge of the rights in the marketplace and empower them, another way that we need to take into account to raise to the challenge is that we have laws and policies which support consumers and that look after their welfare. This means usually having a consumer protection law, which is probably the basis of all other consumer protection related laws, but it is also maintaining a consumer protection perspective when enacting other laws. And I'm especially thinking of sectoral laws and laws of regulated sectors such as energy, telecommunications, or financial services, which have a very high impact on consumers' welfare. How can we succeed in putting forward a consumer protection policy? Well, as I briefly mentioned before, the first stone is a good knowledge of what consumer protection is from the relevant stakeholders, and it is a good knowledge by consumers of their rights and obligations. For this, it is very important to appeal to consumers, to cater information and education campaigns to the needs of specific groups of consumers, to attend to the needs of vulnerable and disadvantaged consumers, especially the illiterate, especially rural population or poor population. It is important that government policies have in mind or are mindful of what is the state of consumer protection in their country, what are their needs, to be able to cater consumer protection policies, education and information policies throughout the myriad of different possibilities of government action. Once that is established, or rather, when that begins to be established, an important step is to set up consumer associations or consumer protection groups that are known and are efficient. Building a consumer protection system means having the civil society fulfilling its role of informing consumers, of voicing consumers' needs, and raising the alarm when needed, and also liaising with different stakeholders. Ensuring a vibrant consumer protection associations network means that the culture of consumer protection will be increased in the country, and consumer effort needs by governments will be multiplied. At the same level as a vibrant consumer protection association network are strong consumer protection authorities. And in these I mean not only government authorities who have the power to advance consumer rights and develop consumer policies, but also enforcement of laws and regulations, be that at the administrative or at the judicial level. For this, government authorities need necessary resources, and judicial authorities need the necessary training. Another important actor in successfully implementing a consumer policy are media groups. That means that the media, in all its forms, are able to portray consumer interest and are able to interact with businesses and other government authorities and to portray consumer needs in their outlets. And finally, one cornerstone of consumer protection at the national level is to ensure that there are good dispute resolution and redress systems so that consumers know they have the right, they know how to enforce it, and they get a reparation when it is due. Now, a condition for successfully implementing a consumer protection regulation is first to define the framework for consumer protection at the national level. And this is something that we would want to work on in the following day. Second is to have an exchange and consultation with relevant stakeholders. Third is to put in place laws and regulations that address consumer protection horizontally, that is cross-cutting, and vertically sector-specific. Another one is the enforcement of the law and training the capacities of those enforcers, be that administrative or judicial. And finally is compliance by enterprises, or the voluntary actions that business undertake in order to comply with consumer protection laws and regulations. I would now like to bring forward some questions for your discussion in this session today. For one, who should participate in the policy making of consumer protection? Who are those relevant stakeholders and how can we identify it? Second, which are the priorities in your country that need to be attended by consumer protection policies? Third, what are the necessary means that are required for these policies to be able to be defined, developed, and put in place and finally enforced? And fourth, what is your schedule? How long do you think a consumer protection policy will need for it to be implemented and successfully absorbed by your country in the different stages that we've named? This is all for now. I hope that you have a very good and rich discussion, and I look forward to seeing you in person tomorrow. Thank you and goodbye.